fucking home.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear me okay. I haven't been in the studio for a few days, so I don't really know what's going on, but we'll get it all worked out today. I didn't have any fun videos this morning to play because today is a big dose of reality for, I think, a lot of us now, isn't it? Of course, I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Thank you for joining me this morning. We have Colonel Joe Adams joining us here shortly. What time is it? 8:05. He'll be here in about 5 minutes. Good morning, Robert. And can't wait to catch up with Colonel Joe Adams. It's been almost, I was not here all of last week. I was only here for a very short time, Monday and Friday of the week prior. And it's been a crazy, crazy, crazy busy time with work, which I'm glad. When you're self-employed, it's good to be busy, but we have been super busy. This week will be no different. I do plan on being here every day, but potentially Wednesday. Wednesday, we have a huge premiere of a film, and I have to be there at 7 a.m. all the way till probably 10 p.m. on Wednesday. So Wednesday is going to be a really big day. Good morning, Rob. And as you guys know, I work in anti-piracy, and we've got the films left and right. So we have been very busy. I'm very thankful for that. Although the past 2 weeks I've actually been working out in Champaign, Illinois, and I'll tell you, there are times when I think I feel like I have lost humanity, and especially the young people. I'll tell you what, spending 2 weeks out in Champaign at the University of Illinois, those kids are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Zero issues at all. I have restored my faith in some of America's youth because I sure haven't in our unfortunate with liberal Democrats. We're going to be talking about that more than you probably care to. Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Linda. And Robert, yes, it is a good problem to have too much work. You get that right. Good morning, Kimberly. And good morning, Dee. So can't wait to talk to Colonel Joe Adams. Today's show is going to be pretty simple. Going to be pretty simple. We're going to be talking about violence, leftist violence. I think that's pretty simple now, isn't it? And I'm also going to touch base a little bit on Donald Trump and some renewed talks about nuclear war. Of course, I don't expect anything to happen, but anytime they start throwing out the word nuclear and moving nuclear submarines around, and this time, there's a lot going on, and we'll get into that towards the end of the show, what could potentially be taking place when it comes to any talk of nuclear war, what's going on with Russia, this big meeting that Pete Hegseth called for all of our top brass, as well as Donald Trump having a meeting with the same folks this week. There's a lot going on, and think we all can see the situation playing out with Ukraine. And of course, Zelensky asking for Tom. I'll tell you, I will be the first to tell you, if the United States gives Zelensky Tomahawk missiles, I myself am going to go to the White House and protest against Donald Trump. That is not what we voted for. I don't expect him to do any such thing. But I'll tell you, good morning, Sherry. There's a lot to talk about today. We've always known that we were going to face violence, didn't we? If Trump won this election, we knew we were going to face violence. It wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. Well, now we've hit that when. As soon as he won, people started planning. You have these people like George Soros giving millions of dollars. What is his Open Society? Something is the name of his charity. And of course, they give millions to billions of dollars. I was just reading this morning about a couple of these paid protesters who were out on all these sites. They're making over $100,000 a year to organize these protests, and the protests are very violent, very violent. I opened up the show showing a video of violence taking place in Chicago. I just read a story this morning that looters rammed a vehicle into the Louis Vuitton store and a smash and grab, type situation. Look what's going on in Chicago. Look what's going on in Portland. And I, like you guys, I watched those videos. We'll play those later. I watched those videos of ICE agents being Border Patrol being attacked in Chicago. Donald Trump in Portland, he is sending out the National Guard. Now, we have not sent out the National Guard yet in Chicago because Pritzker doesn't want it. Mayor Brandon Johnson doesn't want it. Oregon, I don't know what the difference is, why we're able to send them to Oregon and not Chicago, but this is a dangerous situation. Axios just reported yesterday that leftist violence is up, liberal violence is up by 30%. 30%. And let's see here. Robert says, always on my mind. Jonathan Kleck shows on the I think the $100 bill, a tsunami that destroys New York City, similar with money showing the Twin Towers and Oklahoma bombing. Robert, there is so much to that. We should talk about that someday because there is a lot going on. A lot of things we can look back to as resources. We're going to bring in Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard because I'll tell you, we need the Washington Guard more than we ever have because your head, we say it all the time, your head better be on a swivel. It really better be now because they are coming out at us with full force. Don't think they're not. Let's see here. Let's bring in Colonel Joe Adams. Good morning, Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. How are you doing this morning? I wore my flag shirt specifically for you.
I think I got the same.
And you got your fatigues on. So you've got your fatigues on, which is even more fitting.
It's a little chilly out here in the woods, so yeah, I've been outside. So fatigues, yeah, just camis. Actually, I brought this back from South Africa. It's a Rhodesian pattern camouflage, so it's old, just like I am.
Well, it's wonderful. You're going to need it because we're at war. Do you feel like we're at war?
Oh, yeah, sure. We've been at war for quite a while. War is not a war unless it's determined. People understand we're at war. Yeah, we're at war. This is the preliminary for a revolution or a civil war in some facet. So, like I say, if you don't have one of these and know how to use it, someday you're going to be sorry. That's inevitable.
I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. Before we get too far into things, Colonel Adams, what is going on right now with the Washington Guard? How can people join? What can you do to help people in this situation right now? Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of people right now who are very fearful because these situations, it's starting to play out in real time. Look, we had a mass shooting in North Carolina on Saturday night. Yesterday, we had this absolute lunatic crash his truck. A former Marine veteran crashed his truck into the LDS church, set fire to the church. They still may not have found all the victims.
Yeah, for some reason, maybe it's in the water, but there's an insanity going across this country. This country has never been in this kind of condition since the post-Civil War. That's the guard dog. Yeah, we're in trouble. But the thing that we really concentrate on the Washington Guard is someday, sometime you're going to be on your own before help gets there. It could be 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 months. And so that's what we train for. And also, yeah, I guess I should announce this. So what happens is, hey, Mocha, we have changed our training pattern at the Washington Guard as of the October muster coming up. We're going to guerrilla warfare. Because we're smaller numbers. The only war I ever fought in conventional was during the Vietnam War. After that, when I was assigned overseas, I deployed 4 more times. I worked with indigenous forces on guerrilla warfare. I had a top of a military or a government that had greater firepower, greater numbers, greater support, and I was quite proficient at it. So we have shifted our gears now in the Washington Guard to teaching guerrilla warfare, and everybody's excited about it. It's something I know a lot about. I've experienced it, and so that's the new announcement for the coming year. The Washington Guard is going guerrilla. So, and think about that. So anyway, then we got our big banquet coming up, our 4th annual.
Yes.
I can't believe we've been here 4 years. our fourth annual on October 11th uh, at the Parish Hall here in Washington, Missouri.
It's in Union.
Huh?
It's in Union.
On Union, Missouri. I'm sorry. Union, Washington, it's to me, it's all the same. Uh, so you got Colonel Jack Jackson's coming in, test pilot for the Harrier. Harrier. People don't understand what a test pilot is. A test pilot is somebody gets into an aircraft that's never flown and hope it works. I mean, this guy's
Right.
got the cojones of a gorilla. Anyway, then you get Doug Giles, founder, warrior, and wild man, ClashDaily.com, author and artist, who's an incredible person. Come out, and I just found out that I'm going to be speaking as usual. I thought this year I could dodge the bullet, but no, my wife says that I'm going to say a few words also. So it's going to be a great event. One thing I insist on at our banquets: great food, and of course, this is all about supporting the first responders in our community
Yes.
to strengthen their position when the inevitable comes. People need to start identifying the inevitable, which goes back to Hamas and
Yes.
Israel. So, where do you want to go from here? You want to talk about Hamas for a second?
Let's talk about Hamas for a second because obviously we have Palestine asking to join BRICS.
Palestine. Look, now the big thing is now everybody's pushing against Israel because they're saying Israel's committing genocide. Uh-huh. So what? So they've made genocide a bad word. When you've got a bad seed, you got to get rid of it. Hamas is nothing more than a weed of society. And then they talk about, oh yeah, well, Israel's bombing civilian targets. Really? Genocide, civilian targets. Who's that sound like? That sounds like Hamas. The inevitable. Of course, most people know that I met with the former Prime Minister of Israel, and we talked about the inevitable. It's inevitable that Hamas is going to invade Israel, and the inevitable came true. They knew it was coming, which is part of the reason that Charlie Kirk became dangerous. There were some
Correct.
rumors, and I think people forgot about it. There were some rumors Israel was not happy with Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk
Correct.
went public, like I have at times, and said that the invasion of Israel was intentional and Israel allowed it to happen. Now,
Correct.
I believe that. Now, it's hard to believe that they would let that happen and slaughter all those innocent civilians who were unarmed because Israel's a socialist state. They weren't allowed to have weapons. And Hamas was the one that says they brought up genocide. They wanted to kill every Israeli and Jew on the planet. That was their plan. So it's okay for the bad guys to talk about genocide, but now they're using the word genocide against Israel, and I frankly don't give a damn. And I do believe that the invasion of Israel, just like Charlie Kirk said, was intentional because when I met with the former prime minister, I said, you know what's coming. Why don't you why don't you choose the time and place? And I've told you before, we would like to, but the West won't allow it. So did they stage this because they know the inevitable? It's going to come to it. So I think that Israel allowed the invasion, which is a horrible thought. All these women and children, people slaughtered by Hamas. But you know, the greater good is it
Well, yeah. I've heard Charlie Kirk's statements on that. Of course, I think we probably all have at this point. I can't say one way or the other if Israel allowed this. If so, it would just be like your typical false flag. They knew the attack was coming. They allowed their border to be open, as Charlie Kirk said. Why he's been to Israel, I have not. He said usually, you have an IDF soldier placed all along that area, but that day you didn't. And I know you said something about the citizens of Israel not being armed, but when I look at videos of Israel and talk to people from Israel, they tell me they're all armed, that you'll see young girls walking around with rifles on their back, like walking through the cities. But that day, for some reason, they were at a music festival where I'm told they did not allow weapons in the music festival. And that's why these people were unarmed. Now, I don't know if that's true, or if I can only guess, like Charlie Kirk was doing. He probably had a lot more information than I do, as do you. But, but we all know this isn't about Israel specifically. It's about the world in general, is that we know false flags occur. And if you were to say that Israel allowed that attack to happen, then we know the obvious reason why, because and like false flags often is the case, is that they allow some of their citizens to be killed for what they feel is the greater good of their country. And what that would be is that this attack gave them the authority to go in and, of course, attack Hamas, make changes, of course, in the Gaza area. And look where we've gone from there. Nothing has ever been the same. But I will disagree with you on one thing. I do think that it is genocide, that Israel against the people in the Gaza region. I do think that I think the reason why Hamas became Hamas, how they grew to be Hamas, just like any there are definitely terrorists, but like any terrorist organization, just like the Houthis, just like the Hezbollah, any oppressed group of people rise up and become violent. And I think that Israel had their big thumb over these people for so long, not allowing them to leave. They have this beautiful waterway, but they're not allowed to use it. They can't actually leave through the water. They're not allowed to leave through Israel. They're just like they're stuck in this barrel with Israel controlling their electricity, their water supply. And I'm not sympathizing with Hamas by any means, but this is often how these groups rise up.
Well, I mean, but actually, I do agree with you. I mean, Israel is involved right now in a strategy of genocide. So, and I'm for that, because they know if they let the Palestinians get loose, they're going to be dealing with this 20 years from now. So they're looking into the future. And so genocide is a bad word, but sometimes I think it's necessary. So I'm on Israel's side. I say take them all out now, which goes back to the weed factor. You have a garden, you get a small weed. If you don't take out that small weed, it's going to be a big weed. So without saying exactly how I feel, I'm on Israel's side. So let it happen, And
Yeah, well, things are, and pieces continue to move. Now, I am not for the killing of any people. I do believe there's a lot of innocent people in the Gaza region. I think there's a lot of people there who hate Hamas as much as Israel does, and certainly not everybody by any means. But however, things are changing by the day. Just this morning, Spain announced that the United States will not be able to use their military bases to provide weapons or support to Israel. So things continue to evolve. And of course, Donald Trump said, just very recently in the past couple of days, that he will not allow Israel to take over the Gaza region, that they will remain separate. Now, he's been very buddy with Netanyahu. So I was a little surprised to hear that announcement.
yeah, and when this war comes to now, first of all, killing people, okay? Well, part of the definition of war is to kill one's enemy, not wound one's enemy, kill them. Because if you wound them, they'll just get better and come back and fight you again. So again, I'm on Israel's side. I've got a guy in Israel right now that I'm talking to, a close friend of mine, former IDF soldier, big supporter of the Washington Guard. And even he says that they're going to fight to the end. They understand they're fighting for the future existence of Israel and the Jewish community. So I'm on their side. I say kill them all.
I say they will
kill them all.
I can't agree with you with that, but I can't agree with you on that statement. But I will say that that Israel will fight till the end, regardless of what any other country thinks. There's no question about that.
I say kill them all and let God sort them out. So anyway, we could talk about Hamas all day long. So the Houthis are crippled. The Hezbollah is shot. And so what Israel's doing is I'm 100% on Israel's side. And if I was 20, 25 years younger, I'd already be over there. We'd be doing this long distance.
It's Colonel Adams, it's a tough situation. I'll be the first to say it's a tough situation because when you just like Yemen, when you go into the Gaza region, you don't know who's who. You don't know. You see these men, young men walking down the street, these women, you don't know, are they part of Hamas? Because it is so encompassing in that area. And then some people will say, well, all the people are part of Hamas. They all support Hamas because they're all against Israel. And it is a very difficult situation because it's not like, it's been proposed that they take these, what is it, 2.5 million people, or was 2.5 million people, and move them to a completely different region. We all know that's absolutely not feasible. So far, no one will
Right.
accept them. And how do you move, over 2 million people to a completely different country and then restart again? But yet, if they stay where they are, I don't see how they will ever get along. The only thing I think that could potentially happen to save this situation, lives on all sides, would be if somehow, some way, somebody intervenes and they tell the people, the Palestinians, if you want to call them Palestinians, that, okay, you can have your region. You are no longer under the thumb of Israel. But then again, we all know they're just going to continue fighting back and forth. So I mean, there is no solution, and there never was, and there never will be.
When a person's ideology is kill a certain group, that's Hamas. So I still say kill them all, let God sort them out.
Yeah, and I see that's the only difference I think with our opinions is that while I support Israel's right to exist, and I always will support Israel's right to exist, I think Netanyahu is corrupt. I've said that from day one. So anyone who thinks I haven't said that, I've been saying that even back when he was charged with all these crimes and wasn't president for a while. I think it was pretty obvious back then. I don't trust Netanyahu at all. But I think that Netanyahu and some of the people of Israel, certainly not all, there's a lot of people in Israel who've come out and protested in the streets against Israel's actions, against the folks over there in the Gaza region. But I think that both sides want to kill each other. I don't think it's one-sided. I think both sides want to kill each other. I've seen countless videos of IDF soldiers just mowing people down, running them over in their vehicles, shooting children. I mean, so I think it's both sides want to kill each other, and that's why this will never work out.
No, Israel's got a chance to settle things. Israel is fighting for its future, period. Hamas is just fighting because they're evil, period. Hey, so Comey gets indicted, huh? Well, people,
Schiff is next.
Made my day. It made my day because I'm waiting, but there's much more coming.
Well, there is Christopher Wray under the gun right now. It was announced yesterday because he allowed those, what was it? I can't remember the number. Was it 185 or something like that undercover agents into Washington, D.C. on January 6th? He's under fire for that, and he's potentially facing an indictment. They say Schiff is next on the chopping block, and Comey definitely deserves his spot number one.
Comey, Hillary, Brennan, Clapper. Now, and now they're talking about the Russian hoax and all that. These guys, these people, were behind everything. Why do you think that Hillary had a private server? That's how they communicated. Why do you think the FBI went in and investigated and found, there were some mistakes, but no serious? The FBI has sent an advance team in, disconnected from the FBI, and scorched all that stuff because they knew it was coming. They got caught, and so they've scrapped everything. But these same characters were all behind the Russian hoax and all the other indictments. It's all the same players. It's all the same players. So this is only the beginning. So stand by. This is gonna get real good. There's a lot of these. These people are traitors. Hey, and don't leave out Barack Obama. Barack Obama actually started the invasion of the United States with the illegals. So he's involved too. So all these characters, this could be the biggest scandal in American history of all these top echelon intelligence people, even top to the FBI. Can you imagine at the head of the FBI? This is going to get interesting.
It's going to get very interesting. And I was trying to, I didn't have a show last week because I was working out of town, but I posted on, social media that, they've brought fencing in to Washington, D.C. Now, people can give me 1,000 different reasons why, but I absolutely believe they brought the fencing in, because we're at war, like I said at the beginning of the show, Axios reported that liberal violence is up by 30%, which is crazy, 30%. And when we start making these arrests and people start getting indicted and these charges are filed against all of these different folks, we can absolutely expect that violence to come to Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're doing the right thing, but this people don't understand. They only get about 50%, maybe 40% of what is going on. So yeah, this is all going to be interesting. But now, it's hard to come on your show and not talk about Charlie Kirk. Charlie,
Right,
Charlie,
of course.
I've watched all the videos and played them over and over again. And, the people that I protected when I was working they were trying to kill. This wasn't soft targets. These people, they wanted to kill them. They were after them. Charlie Kirk is viewed by the Democrats that he was a future presidential possibility. No, it gets further. I say that Charlie Kirk was in line to be our next vice president on the next elections. And people say, oh, that's pretty far-fetched. Really? No, it's not.
Well, people don't know that he is part of a political action committee. Most people just think he's a commentator or that he holds these, these sessions at schools. People don't realize that he was bringing in millions of dollars, and he was making a huge difference in turning over these elections for conservatives.
I got a flashback to what I was saying about Israel. Charlie Kirk made that comment, like I did, that it was an intentional invasion to go to war, to give them a reason to attack. And so there was some. I don't know if you remember this. There was some chatter out there that during that rally they were actually concerned about an Israeli Mossad agent coming in and killing Charlie Kirk because of that. Because Charlie Kirk was going to continue that message, and they didn't want that message to continue. So there was some concerns about the security there, knowing that there's chatter that Israel might try and take out Charlie Kirk. That's how dedicated they are to their movements. Anyway.
Well, they offered him, what was it, $150 million to quit talking about it. And he refused the money. And he allegedly, I say allegedly because apparently his wife, Erica, says it's not true. But plenty of other people, including Tucker Carlson, said that it is true. And so therefore, who do you believe? I don't know. But, it was a serious situation. But, the most interesting part to me about the entire situation with Charlie Kirk is how many people had no idea what he really does and what he really stood for, outside of, like, again, speaking at schools, putting these groups together for Turning Point. Most people don't realize, when I was out last year in Georgia, getting out the early vote for Donald Trump. Now, I was working for Elon Musk's, his political action committee called America PAC. But at the same time, I was getting people from Turning Point messaging me every week. Hey, do you want to come out and work for us instead? If you want to come to Wisconsin or Michigan, we'll pay you X number of dollars. They paid a little differently than America PAC. We were paying about just a little under $50 an hour to work for America PAC. And Turning Point was paying, it was like $1,500 to $2,500 a week to go out and work for Turning Point in these different states. And I don't think people understand how many elections were won, including Donald Trump, because of Turning Point. Turning Point was pivotal, as was America PAC, Elon Musk company, in getting Donald Trump into office. And so, Colonel Adams, I agree with you that Donald Trump and Republicans owed Charlie Kirk. I hadn't heard his name floated around as VP, but I wouldn't be surprised at all.
It's, believe me, the intelligence community, everybody pointed to Charlie Kirk. Hey, this guy is going to be the next vice president.
And he was going places, no question about it. No question about it. So much more than a political commentator. But here's the thing: you support Israel, as do I. But do you think that I'm not going to say is Israel capable of it, because we know they are. Do you really think that Israel was behind what happened to Charlie Kirk? Because we all know, come on, nothing adds up in this case. Nothing adds up. At least to me, it doesn't. What do you think?
Israel didn't have anything. Israel was trying to make Charlie a deal he couldn't refuse, and they never got to that point. And Charlie wasn't cooperating. But no, what happened was with these, nobody's talking about the Manchurian candidate state of mind that there's a thousand, this assassin that killed Charlie, there's over 1,000 more like him out there. And it all goes back to
You
the
better believe
social
it.
media poisoning in the dark web and all that. These guys are being programmed because the kid that shot Charlie Kirk thinks he did the right thing for America. Nobody's talking about the Manchurian candidate aspect. If he didn't take a shot at Charlie Kirk, somebody was. But the security for Charlie Kirk now, that's where
So
the
lacking.
Republicans should have stepped
Yeah.
forward and said, "Hey, this guy's valuable. We need to pump up the volume on his security." So I've studied all the footage available out there on the assassination, and it was a joke. In Butler, Pennsylvania, when they tried to kill Trump, at least they had a perimeter. It didn't work because they couldn't communicate. But in this case, they didn't even have a perimeter. I had guys back there on top of those
Correct.
buildings, and nobody was glassing the area in grid formation.
Correct.
Doing those things at large
He
events
had
is very, very important. They had none of that.
They only
None of
had
that.
they only had 6 law enforcement personnel there, as well as his own security team, and his own security team is just a couple of people. So we had probably less than 10, security folks there in general. And there's I know I've heard a lot of the talk. I've watched every video there is. There's a lot of weird stuff that went on in that case, a lot of videos. Most of the videos I look at and I can dismiss them pretty easily. But there were some weird things that to me are unexplainable. I don't think Israel was behind it. I really think the simplest answer is the answer that, just like you said, we have this trans power crazy guy coming out there, and he represents exactly what the trans power movement is. And I think he was radicalized in college, which happens so often. And like you said, there's 1,000 more out there just like him.
Yeah.
We can come up and go down all these different rabbit holes, but I still think it was ultimately him, Tyler Robinson, that committed this crime.
Oh, he did. I just got a note from my producer. I'm supposed to explain glassing. So in a situation, okay, first of all, the security detail didn't reverse engineer the security. They didn't ask themselves, if I was going to kill Charlie, how would I do it? No one brought that up. They didn't revert. You always reverse engineer a security detail. So none of those buildings were covered. The guy had a clear shot, the only shot. In fact, knowing there was only one place he could shoot from because of that awning and that tent in the direction of fire. Excuse me, all his security is standing under the tent. A few's working the crowd, and nobody's glassing. Now, in glassing, what I'm talking about, you get a grid coordinate assigned to you, and you glass that area and continue to stay on that. Have some guys back on a perimeter that communicate with, hey, I got this going on. Hey, I got this going on. I see this. None of that. He was a sitting duck. Period.
Yes.
Sitting duck.
Most definitely. And it seems like based, I own a security company. We do security for, as we've talked about before, a lot of, top celebrities, musicians, and even big CEOs of companies. And I'll tell you, we look at all these different aspects, and we're just a, medium-sized, security company. And then you have a situation like this, and looking at it, it's very obvious to me that they thought the threat was somebody walking up to the table. I don't think they took any type of threat seriously as far as somebody bringing a weapon into the venue. They looked like they were concerned about people accosting, physically attacking, Charlie Kirk right there at the table. That's what they were set up for. They weren't set up for anything else.
No, the security detail that he had around him have been desensitized. All we saw was one event. This guy's doing this every day all over the planet, all over the country.
Correct.
And the security became lax and desensitized. And that's the worst thing you can have. So anyway, security aided and abetted the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I don't care if they're law enforcement. Just because you're law enforcement, who makes you an expert on security? Well, obviously they were not. So anyway.
Right. It's highly unfortunate, And a lot of the people that I think Charlie Kirk, hired, I'm not saying they were true security professionals. I remember a couple of them were very high level security, but they were also his friends, people he knew.
I worked those when I was with the Contra rebels, and I had to tour the country on fundraisers with Adolfo Claro, the president of the Contras. It was tense, but I never let down my guard. And they were trying to kill him. So, as far as doing security for celebrities, I never did that. Celebrities are a pain in the ass because a celebrity will get a death uh, death threat, and then want to go walk on the beach. So scratch that. No,
Right.
I'm not doing it. No, they want to go down Rodeo Drive and shop after their car was graffitied. No, I'm not doing that. So you can have all the celebrities you want. Uh,
Thank you.
there was something that concerned me that I looked into, uh, and that's there's there appears to be a disconnect between the Americans, civilian world, and the military. And this is way down the road. This is think tank stuff. So
You've got that
so
right. I couldn't agree with
yeah,
you more.
there seems to be a disconnect, and it's good. Here's the problem with that. Fewer than I'm going to read this because I have to be. I'm going to get it right. Fewer than 1% of Americans currently serve in the U.S. military. Less than
Yes.
1%. And the number of living veterans is projected to decline up to 34% over the next 25 years. That would be me. During World War II, 16% of Americans served, creating a strong cultural connection to the armed forces. Everybody in this country during World War II was somehow connected in supporting our military. We don't have that anymore. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My grandma who was a homemaker, she, had to leave her home and she was down here in St. Louis, under the viaduct at the Armory building, riveting, what I don't even know what riveting is, doing rivets. I mean, everybody was
Everybody.
involved in some way. Everyone.
Today, that connection is weakening. Only 13% of young adults surveyed by the Pentagon in the target recruiting age had a parent who served, down from 40% in 1995. So now we're at 13% of young adults who had a parent who served, and that's down 40% since 1995. So even though Fox News covers all of these things in our new defense,
Secretary Moore.
what do you say?
Secretary Moore.
Secretary of War. I love that one. So it appears that we're connected. Everybody's patriotic. No, no, no. We are only seeing a small percentage of people who are actually patriotic.
Absolutely. You can drive around your neighborhood and look at how many flags are on houses. I mean, it's pretty
Yes, but
obvious.
it's a small percentage, and it's going to get
Yes.
worse, and that's really really bad. Anyway, that was a Pentagon.
It's gonna get it is
That was
it is gonna get worse because these days, if you put an American flag on the front of your house, you become a
Well,
target.
let me tell you something. You come get my flag and try and take my flag down, my ass might be going to jail, but you're going to be 6 feet under. Don't screw with me. When we go to events and stuff, and I said, so I told my Deanna, I said, Deanna, I'm close to going to jail. She said, I think it's time we leave. So anyway, don't screw with my
You
flag.
know,
Uh,
Colonel Adams, I have something I'd like to talk to you about, and of course, we're open to anything you want to talk about as well. Something I want to talk to you about because, like I said, Axios reported that liberal violence is up by
mm,
30%. That's a very significant increase because if you look at the division between us, I mean, when are conservatives violent? I would really like to know. Now, I'm not saying that white Christians don't commit crimes. We can look at Dennis Radar and a few other people who obviously are white Christians that have committed crimes. But it's different. You don't see conservatives, Republicans, Christians ramming their truck into a church, a full church with shooting people, setting it on fire, trying to kill as many people as you can. You don't see conservative Republicans, Christians going up to an ICE facility and trying to fight the police. And when you talk about that disconnect between Americans and military, what about the disconnect between a certain set of Americans and law enforcement? I never in my life, if you would have asked me this back in the 80s when I was a young child or a teenager, would we ever face a time where people were at a police station or at a ICE facility fighting with police, throwing Molotov cocktails at them? I would have thought people respected law enforcement so much they would never do that. It's just shocking to me. It's really upsetting to me to see what these people are going through, what our law enforcement officials are going through.
Well, the definition of what you're talking about, and I thought you were a pole dancer in the 80s. Somebody told me you were a pole dancer. Anyway,
I was like 10.
hey, well, just to categorize that and just put it where it's easy. You only have to understand one thing: the response of the community to Charlie Kirk's murder versus the death of George Floyd, and that says it all right there. You know, we, the policies of the Republican Party and the conservatives is so much different than the radicalization of the Democrats and the George Soros people. And that's your answer. This random acts of violence is a byproduct of the Democrats' policies of non-law enforcement, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all that. In their minds, they're doing what they think is correct. But it goes back to the social media and all these other things. They're being brainwashed or they're being paid. But the biggest fear right now in our society is random acts of violence. And it can happen to any place, anytime, any person. That's what you have to prepare for. And when that happens to you, you're going to be on your own. You're going to be on your own.
Yes.
Which goes back to
and
this.
You absolutely have to be able to protect yourself.
Really, never more in American history has it been so important to be able to take care of yourself. Period. I say, well, I'll just call 911. Going to respond. Response.
Good luck.
Emergency responders. That's responding to an incident that is happening, has already happened. And then you are on your own. Prepare, people.
I couldn't agree with you more. And we've talked about that on the show. Now, nothing against first responders, clearly, but, first responders, you call 911 and they're on other calls, depending on what location you live in, what municipality, they might be there in 3 minutes. But you know what? 3 minutes, quite honestly, is too long, because if let's just say I'm standing right here and there's somebody trying to break into the window next to me, do you think me calling 911 is going to help at all? You have to be prepared to act now to protect yourself and your family.
I might call 911, but it's after the fact. Don't get in my way. So our
Right.
family's self-sufficient. We don't no. We like say on the sign on the side of the house. You've all seen that. We don't call 911. So in fact,
Right.
I actually had a dream where I actually called 911 and they show up and we've got a mass casualty event at my house. And they said, well, why didn't you call 911 when it was happening? I said, I didn't have time. When the
Right.
McCloskeys, the people, the famous couple that defended their mansion down in the Central West End, they called 911. It took them 4 hours to get there. They were on their own for 4 hours against a bunch of people, Antifa, who want them dead.
Antifa wants us all dead these days, Colonel
rich
Adams.
family.
They want us.
Yeah, gated community with security, rich family, attorneys, big mansion. Wouldn't you think they'd be safe? That's why they hired security and gated community. You can't get it. Well, they tore down the gate and bypassed the security.
Right.
They called 911 and they're on their own for 4 hours. That had to be unbelievable. And for me, it was one thing, but Mark, his wife had never even fired a gun. Well, of course, they're trained now.
Right, that is correct.
And they're active members in the Washington Guard. So that was a wake-up call.
Right, that is correct. As a matter of fact, I think her weapon wasn't even operational. It was more just used as a deterrent, from what I recall.
Yeah.
But but that's exactly a good example. And there are many examples, and I can't tell you how many cases I've seen where someone didn't even have time to pick up a phone and call 911, or they pick up the phone and call 911 while they've already been shot, and they pass away before responders arrive. You cannot count on anyone to save you. You have to be able to save yourself. And this is becoming more important every day, because we're seeing these attacks. Look at what happened in North Carolina. And I've spent a lot of time in my life trying to figure out, how do we stop crime? How do we stop these mass killings? And And, it's not gun legislation. The only answer, quite honestly, is more guns. It's more guns. When more people are armed, people are going to be less likely to commit these crimes because you know what? They're not going to be able to carry out their plan if they get shot the moment they step out of their car door. In the case of, the situation, let's say yesterday at the LDS church in Michigan.
Oh. And when it happens, it's going to happen fast, which goes back to situational awareness. If you can get that one little tip, one little thing, that guy looked at me wrong, I'm going to the situational awareness. Most people walk around looking at their damn phone. I wonder how many people how many people's been mugged or killed or murdered, whatever, looking at their phone.
Many. I've written about those cases. There are many.
We talked about that little girl on that train down there. If she was with situational awareness, she gets she sits in front of the assassin where she should have sat in the back.
Yeah.
I mean, just people need to wake up. McCloskeys were very, very lucky. They got a wake up call that the odds were, there was 200 people there against them, telling them they're going to burn down their house. We're going to kill you. We're going to kill your dog. They're calling the police. Where are the police at? The only thing that saved them is Mark McCloskey had an AR-15 by the door, and he was able to grab that and go outside. And it happened so fast. If you look at that picture of Mark McCloskey standing in front of his mansion, he don't even have his shoes on. You know why? He didn't have time.
He was eating dinner.
He didn't have.
Yeah, I've interviewed him. I've interviewed him a couple times.
Good buddies. He didn't even have time to put shoes on.
Right.
But
right.
The difference was the AR-15. Now we all know that Hillary's killed more people than an AR-15. So what this is, and what is this? What is
it? It's
this?
not enough just to buy a gun. You have to train.
Oh yeah, people think they go buy a gun, and that's all they got to do. How many people have I trained that had never even shot the gun before? So
right. And that's it. That's just it. We all saw, or many of us saw that case in Pittsburgh recently, just a couple weeks ago, where there was a woman who tried to break up a fight, a domestic situation, which we know are the most heated, situations. And she's just a passerby. She saw this man and woman fighting, and the man was beating the woman, and she intervened. Well, this guy, started beating on her and stabbing her, and she took out her gun. And guess what? That guy took her gun away from her and executed her right there in the street. It's not enough to have a gun. You have to know how to use it and be ready to use it.
What are you reading my notes here? Are you reading my notes? No, that was the next thing I was going to say. If you buy a weapon and are carrying that weapon and have not trained properly that weapon, they're going to take it away from you because you know why? You're going to hesitate, and they're going to take it away. Right. So now that just because you have a gun, that doesn't make you safe unless you know how to use the damn thing. That's your own.
And be
because
ready.
You're going to be on your own, and they will.
You cannot hesitate. Colonel Adams, I've already told everyone I know, don't ever come to my house and play games. Don't come to my window or, sneak in the house or because I will not hesitate. And, so if you know me and you're playing games, you're probably going to get killed. So it's better to just not do it. But that's just it. Too many people hesitate and they don't pull the trigger. You have to be ready and willing to do that if you're going to carry a weapon.
Yeah, it's all understand. All guns are developed and designed for one reason, is to kill. Whether it be a deer, whether it be combat, all of the modern weapons were designed because of wars. And so there's only one reason that gun was invented, was to kill. Now, so when you pull that gun, you've got a killing weapon in your hand, you become responsible and you better know what the hell you're doing. Because it could be the weapon that kills you. So anyway,
right.
That's again what the Washington Guard's all about. And I know some people, and I've trained some people that shouldn't have a gun because that's exactly what was going to happen to them. And there are people out there that cannot be trained. They just do not have the nerve mechanism to become a that is reliable with a weapon. We've had a couple in the Guard that we took off to the side and gave them special training, and they barely, and I can think of one lady right now that when I first started with her, hey, she shouldn't have a gun because
Right.
but we've got to a point now. It's taken about 3 years, Deanna, and we've got her where now she's responsible enough. But it took that long.
I'm glad to hear that.
So anyway, just because you got a gun,
It's a very personalized situation, a person and their
yeah,
weapon.
just because you got a gun, that doesn't mean you're safe. Uh, Again, I'll let you guys. I know you probably got some stuff. I took up too much of your time. Don't forget our bank.
Oh no, never.
Don't forget our bank. Hey guys, come on. Some of you I've met, some of you I've never met. Come out and hear what I got to say, which is Dr. Doom, and meet Colonel Jack Jackson and Doug Giles. Incredible people. I mean, test pilot for the Harrier. What's worse? Test pilot for the. Anyway, great people. Come out and meet us. Go to the WashingtonGuard.com. What about for tickets? What is that?
WashingtonGuard.com and go to events.
Oh yeah, just type in WashingtonGuard.com and then click on events and get your tickets. Come out and see us. Hope to see you there, Tabitha. Got a great bunch of people. And Jamie Allman again is the MC, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Meet a lot of people. Come out and say hi. I'd like to meet all of you, and we'll continue our stories. I tell you how I really feel when I'm off the podcast. So anyway, come out and see us. It's going to be a great event and great food, and it's all for our training to help support first responders. So that.
Are you having the cake? Are you having the cake thing again, the dessert thing, like you did
No,
last year?
Deanna said no, we're not. I don't know why.
Oh darn it,
Yeah,
Deanna!
I thought it
was very popular.
I thought it was a great idea. Anyway, so
It was definitely a great
I'm not in
idea.
charge of the events. She's in charge. So,
Well, it'll be a fantastic event like it always is.
a night of heroes and patriotism, support first, because I've said it before, the most important people in our communities are first responders, but they're
Yes, especially now while they're under attack.
it's going to get much worse. Random acts of violence because it's okay because the Democrats are saying it's okay. Anyway, that's the difference between Democrats and Republicans.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be talking about that here in just a minute. You better believe
on your last show, did I tell you that I personally have declared war against the Democrats? No,
You did not.
Okay. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. Against the left.
Oh, the left. Okay, I'm done. I've had it. If you're a leftist, you've got nothing to say I need to hear. I'm done. People just walk away. There's no getting through to these people. They're crazy. They're
You're right.
lunatics. You can't. You ever been to an insane asylum? I have. They're nuts, and that's what you're dealing with. Just disregard. Get away. I personally have declared war on the left. Don't screw with me. Don't talk to me. You got nothing to say I need to hear. See you next week, and hope to see you guys at the event. Love all of you. Thanks for having me on. God bless America and God bless Donald Trump. Thank you.
And God bless you and Deanna, Colonel Adams. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will look forward to seeing you next Monday. We'll recap on the event again at that time. Thank you for joining us. It was so great to have you, and we'll see you soon. Have a good day, Colonel Adams. And love some Colonel Adams. So happy that he could join us today. And he stayed with us for a long time. I wish he did that every time. Usually he pops in for 30 minutes and then we have to say goodbye to him. But I love having him on, preferably the longer the better, because there's just so much to talk about. And I love his insight on every single topic. And yes, Paul, the fastest way to get killed nowadays is to intervene in a domestic violence situation. I'll leave it to the police. You got that right, Paul. Domestic situations are the most dangerous situation. Kimberly, weren't the McCloskeys also Democrats? Interesting question. And I was kind of thinking about that. Yeah, I don't recall. I don't think so, but I know whenever the situation first occurred, I believe they are civil rights attorneys that everyone assumed they were Democrats and really they weren't. From what I understand, I don't really remember. I've interviewed Mark McCloskey a couple different times, over the years, and he's always been a, great guest. I don't know him personally. I've met him once, and that's about all. But there are some things I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the violence. We're going to talk before we head out today a little bit about Russia and NATO and the threats back and forth with Russia saying they will go to war with NATO. Europe claims that they think Russia is going to go to war with them at least within the next 5 years. Donald Trump moving nuclear submarines around kind of as a threat, defense posture to Russia. We'll talk about that, here in a few minutes. But first, what I want to talk about is the situation that we're facing. We covered it a little bit with Colonel Adams. What is happening in our world right now? Why is it that here in America, we are so divided? We've never been this divided. Now, that's not because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not the person that divided us. That would go back to the Clintons, to the Obamas, to the Bidens. That's when all the division occurred. And people want to say, well, why Clinton? The Clintons have caused a lot of division. And this was just, I think, as of today, 5 days ago. I'm going to play this clip of Hillary Clinton talking about Christians. Just
we
take a look
haven't
at
gotten to
this.
the more perfect union, and we fought a civil war over part of it. And people have been protesting, for hundreds of years that, things were not as they should be, given our ideals and how we should be moving toward them. So I think that's what makes us so special as a country. And the idea that you could turn the clock back and try to recreate a world that never was, dominated by, let's say it, white men of a certain persuasion, a certain religion, a certain point of view, a certain ideology, is just doing such damage to what we should be aiming for. And we were on the path toward that. I mean, imperfectly, lots of, bumps along the way, but I agree with you, we were on the right trajectory.
Let me.
Okay, so, are you calling for violence, Hillary Clinton? What is she talking about? It's very clear. She's talking about white Christian conservatives. Now, why are white Christian conservatives so dangerous and so bad? What are we doing to other people? I don't recall any white Christian conservative driving their vehicle through a church and setting it on fire with the hopes of killing hundreds of Christians. And yes, Mormons are considered Christians. That's not one of us. That's not something we do. Absolutely 100% not. I don't see any white Christian conservatives out protesting. Take a look at this. Take a look at this. This is what they think of us. This is why we are. I would say they're at war with us. We're in a defensive posture. We're not yet at war with them. Now, Colonel Adams might be, but we as a whole are not at war with them yet. But it's probably going to happen soon if this continues. Because
the red
these
line
people, they
has been
hate us.
crossed. Donald Trump just posted the following on Temu Twitter. At the request of Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, I am directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. I'm also authorizing full force if necessary. Listen to me. I need to interpret this for you real quick. And I'm coming to you from the veteran tent here in Union Station because I'm about to make a call out to all veterans nationwide. Donald Trump has now officially called for troops to be deployed to an American city, in this case, Portland. He's calling Portland war-ravaged, which is not true. There's no war happening in Portland, in case there's anybody who's curious. This is simply misinformation. After the normalization of troops here in D.C., it is now okay to put troops anywhere. The problem is this. He said in there that Portland is under siege by Antifa. For those of you who remember, a couple weeks ago, he signed an executive order saying that Antifa is a terrorist organization. Guys, Antifa is not even an organization. It's an ideological movement that we...
Okay, we're going to stop him there, and then let's take a look. And by the way, I've got some news for you this morning as well. Let's take a look at Chicago.
Red line has been crossed.
guy.
Donald Trump just posted the following on Temu Twitter. At the request of Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, I am directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists.
Okay, so I'm not going to play that guy's entire video. It's several minutes long. What he's doing is he's mobilizing liberals to come out and fight Border Patrol, to fight ICE agents, to fight the National Guard. He's out there mobilizing people to stand up against law enforcement, federal law enforcement in particular. And Jay says they stand in the way of socialism. And Jay says, let's see here. They don't realize what will happen if the right decides to fight back. You got that right. And Mandy, who is this guy? Just another idiot, like Jay said. And Jay says, small groups in the next town over every Thursday with their proud Antifa flags. Okay, so Antifa was designated a terror organization by our president. You may, these folks may not like it, they may not agree, but one thing Antifa is that it absolutely is an organization. They have shirts that say Antifa, that they would spray paint on things. They get funded. They are definitely an organization. They are definitely a terror organization. They absolutely 100% are, as is Trans Power. Now, Donald Trump has not designated Trans Power a terror organization yet. It's something he's looking into. Does that mean that all trans people are terrorists or violent? No. Does it mean that all Democrats are part of Antifa? Absolutely not. There's a lot of Democrats out there who are Christian who hate to see all this as much as we do. Now, why they're still voting for Democrat policies, I'll never get. I guess they need that wake-up call. But it's not against all Democrats. But what we have left, and that I used to call it the 2%, now it's more like the 4% of folks on the far left. And what are they thinking? Who in your right facility like ICE, or like the National Guard headquarters, and people say, well, they're not being violent, they're peaceful to you. And yes, at every one of these protests, there are a group of peaceful people, and then there are the people and they're the violent ones. And yes, they do make the entire group look bad. But it's not just Antifa. It's also people like the Communist Party. Now, there's a new Communist Party out there. I can't recall their name right now. And they're just as bad. These people want nothing but chaos. This is what they want to do. They want to go out. They want to fight with law enforcement. They want to be violent. They want to fight with you. Because what is it all about? It is literally about socialism. Antifa, believe it or not, the majority of Antifa members are not Democrats. They are liberal. They're not Democrats. They hate the government. They don't like Republicans. They don't like Democrats. They want to just tear this country apart. They want to cause chaos, and they're paid very well to do it. Like I said earlier, there's a couple of these people, probably a lot of them, 2 of them I've come across so far, that make over 100 go out and put these protests together. Organized. They have the same signs. Now they go up. It's like this little black and white figure that they put up at these different cities. So we know it's organized from one city to the next because they have the same signs. They have the same blow up figure and all these different things. But here's what I don't understand. And I'm not trying to come down against Donald Trump. I know nothing can happen overnight. And speaking of things happening overnight, I just saw a breaking news report that guess what? The National Guard obviously is on its way to Portland, and that they are considering bringing them to Chicago as well to break up all this nonsense. And I'm sure you guys already heard some of that yesterday. And there was something else that came through. And let's see here. Well, we'll figure. Oh, here it is. Federal agents in downtown Chicago that already this morning. That's what it was that I saw that came through. When is Donald Trump going to stand up and say, I don't care what JB Pritzker says. I don't care what Mayor Brandon Johnson says, Oregon says. We are going to go in, whether you like it or not, and we're going to put an end to these violent protests. To one of our federal officers or any police officer, a federal in particular for this particular situation, and you lay a hand on them, you get too close, you violate the law in any way, you're going to be charged federally. You're not going to see the light of day for 20 years. We need to make the punishment so severe that these people will not go out and even consider doing such a thing. Now, of course, people want to say that's a slippery slope because one day that could turn and we might be those people out there protesting for our very lives. But we've already seen what happens to us. Anybody remember January 6th? Most of those people were peacefully walking through the Capitol building, and then they spent some of them up to a year or more in solitary confinement. They've already done it to us. We've already been there. We've already been through all this, and yet we are still not violent. And I know Donald Trump is doing everything he can to stop this. A friend of mine who was a federal law enforcement officer messaged me last night, and he was talking about it. I was replying that I'm very upset about this situation, as so many of us are, because me, like so many other people, I want something done today. I know a lot of police officers, a lot of federal agents for every branch, in this country, and I want those people to be protected, as do you. And it's not happening fast enough for me, but I do know there are certain things that have to be done before Trump can't just say, okay, we're sending thousands of National Guard here, there. There's a lot to the process, a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. Law enforcement lives are going to be lost in the meantime. And right now, quite honestly, what's happening right there in Portland is the police yesterday, they had to retreat. They were outnumbered, overpowered. They had to retreat. Nowhere in this country should police have to from violent protesters peacefully marching. If you're causing police, law enforcement officers to retreat, you should be arrested. You absolutely should be arrested. And oh, Joe, Colonel Adams says, hey, I forgot to mention that group of transgender militants came to the St. Charles this weekend buying guns. Oh, well, Colonel Adams, we'll definitely have to talk about that. And we might talk about that before next Monday, because the hands are getting into the guns are getting into the hands of Antifa, of trans power people, and so on. And we've got to be very careful with that, and we have to be careful who we direct our hate at too, because it's not Democrats in general. It's not the LGBTQ community in general. It's a certain set of people who are on the very far left. And those folks want to cause us harm. Now, the situation yesterday that took place in Michigan, in Grand Blanc, Michigan, with the former Marine. His name was Thomas Jacob. Was it Sanford? Thomas Jacob Sanford. And I'm hearing reports on both sides. There are some people who say he was a Trump supporter. There are people who say he hated Trump. There's comments out there that he argued with people in these different groups, hated Christians, hated conservatives. We know the FBI is treating this situation as a targeted attack against Christians. So to me, and if we find out that he is in fact a Republican, he's not, I know for a fact he's not a registered Republican because I looked up his voter records. He is an active voter. However, registered voter, he has no party affiliation. To me, if you're a strong Republican or a strong person that supports Trump, you are definitely going to have a party, a party listed, I would think anyway. And Jay says any attack on law enforcement needs to be a federal charge with minimum prison time. Thank you for saying that, because Jay, I got sidetracked a little bit. And that is exactly what my friend told me last night. I was saying, I can't believe this is happening. We need to do something right now. Right now. We need to protect our officers right now. And he said, it's coming. It's coming. We will not be let down. It is coming. And this is somebody who puts his life on the line every single day to protect us Americans. He said it is coming. And these people will be charged federally. They will see their time in jail. And as soon as they start getting these big, long sentences, with no bail. They will not be given bail on these federal charges. Then they're all going to simmer down just a little bit. But what happens between now and then? And there are some of them who are never going to simmer down. They're going to push it, push it, push it because that's their lifestyle. That's their job, is to agitate. And it's so frustrating to me. It is so frustrating to me that I just want somebody to do something right now. I want us to flood these cities with National Guardsmen who have been deputized, who have the real guns with real bullets, who have the right to protect themselves and their fellow law enforcement officers. It's so aggravating to me. I don't know how we as a country, this is America. This is America. In America, we protect our law enforcement officers, don't we? So why aren't we doing that? I just don't understand it. And I'm not trying to again come down on Donald Trump. And yes, I want instant action, but really, is it instant? Because we knew this was going to happen, didn't we? This has been going on. What did we vote for? Quite honestly, remember under Obama, under Biden, the war on police. Remember those days? And officers were being ambushed. Remember those days? And it's still happening. It's absolutely still happening. But we can't look at what's going on right now in Portland, Chicago, and other cities, Los Angeles, around the country, and say, well, we didn't expect this. Now we've got to order up the troops. Of course we expected it. We expected this and more, because it will be more. We've said as soon as we always said, remember on the show on my times, we talked about it, that if Donald Trump is elected, there absolutely will be a civil war. There absolutely will be. When, we don't know, but something's going to set it off, and that's going to trigger it. And I think that these people on the far left, I'm not saying Democrats, I'm talking about people on the far left, the people who are anti-Christian, because trust me, you can't be Christian and out there fighting with police officers. It's just not possible. You can't be Christian and going out and committing these mass shootings. It's just not possible. And so therefore, these people on the far left, they have to be stopped. I'm not saying to physically go out and stop them, but at some point, our government has to step in, and we have to do something today before we start losing lives today. As you can see, I'm extremely aggravated about the entire situation. It's very upsetting to me. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it all day today and every day after until this gets resolved. I just can't even imagine what it would be like to be out there. And here we have a federal facility, an ICE facility. Okay, let's just say, as one example, we have an ICE facility. We have all of these violent people come out throwing Molotov cocktails, who many of them are armed. They are armed. There's no way to keep people from showing up being armed. And we have at them, throwing bottles at them, just completely out of control, completely out of control. And you can't tell me that this has to happen, that we just have to let it play out. You can't tell me that, because I know it's not true. I know there are things we can do, and things I expect Donald Trump to do. Where our hands were tied before, weren't they? Under Obama and under Biden, our hands were tied. There was nothing we could do. We didn't have the power to do a darn thing, but now we do. So why isn't it happening? Why isn't it happening now? And stops worrying so much about some of the other things going on, and protects our law enforcement first and foremost. I think he will, but it's just not happening fast enough. And so, again, Axios reporting that liberal violence is up 30%. And you know what? Yes, mass shootings happened in North Carolina. Also a veteran, by the way, in North Carolina. I read an interesting story. I can't recall that guy's name. I should have looked into him a little bit further, but I was pretty busy with some other things this weekend. But I thought it was interesting where he was an escort, not that kind of escort, but he escorted a singer. Her name's Kelly Pickler. I don't have the faintest clue who she is, but he escorted her to a big award show. I thought that was kind of interesting how he went from that to becoming a mass shooter. 3 people. Then we got the situation again at the LDS church in Michigan yesterday. And the word's still out on that guy. I don't know everything there is to know about Thomas J. Sanford, but more details will follow, of course. But there is no way any Christian could possibly ram their truck through a church and set it on fire. And I'm still hearing that they are still potentially, could recover additional victims, because the church is huge, burned to the ground, and that they have recovered, I think now, a total of 4 victims last I heard. That number could grow, we are told. And let's see here. Lori says, too many people think they are validated by going against police because a couple bad apples. Do they go against all of the doctors if there's malpractice? Right, exactly. Going to call first when they have a problem. Or who are they going to call first? Well, Lori, that's exactly that. You see these people, these Antifa terrorists. Of course, the first thing they're going to do, they're sitting at home at night, and guess what? Somebody with a Trump T-shirt, the very police that they absolutely hate to save and protect them. No question about it. Mr. Parnell, they want a civil war so they can justify Gideon and Planter surveillance 24/7. Also a good possibility. Jay says, put embassy Marines at federal detention centers. That will halt it. Yeah, Jay, exactly that. We've got to step up. We have to do something, and not tomorrow, not next week. We need to do it today. That's what we need to do it today. And we just have to have confidence that Donald Trump is going to do that because that's what we voted for. I feel very much like Biden's still in charge because nothing's happening to protect our law enforcement officers, and it's extremely upsetting to me. But on another note, and we'll be talking more about leftist violence as the week goes on, because this is just the beginning. This isn't the middle. It's not the end. This is the beginning. We all knew this time was coming. Now here it is. And we have to start worrying about random violence. Are you going to become a victim of random violence? If you have a flag in your house, is somebody going to come to your home? Because that's what happens in a wartime, isn't it? I would honestly, I wouldn't be surprised by it at all. Not at all. We have no idea what these people are capable of. Absolutely terrifying situation. But before we head out, I know I'm way over my time. The last thing I kind of wanted to talk about, and we'll move into some of these other things and possible solutions. And I'm sure by tomorrow, there'll be a whole new story to talk about. And one of the things I thought was interesting I guess, let me see here. Speaking of violence in the world days, let's see. I have all these videos saved, but I don't know which one is which. We'll talk about that tomorrow. I've got a bunch of videos here, but I don't know. I think it's this one.
It's the third time you've been saying something.
If it plays.
Oh, down.
This is a Popeyes order. Hold on a second. I'm going to mute that because there's nothing to the signal. These people didn't do anything wrong. But I wanted to show this. This is the world we're in right now. This is a Popeyes restaurant. Do you see that? That's bulletproof glass. Popeyes has, in several of their restaurants now, they're bringing out the bulletproof glass. Now, again, none of these people have done anything. There's nothing going on here. They're just talking about how Popeyes has this bulletproof glass. It's crazy to me to think. I'm going to see if I can get back up where we can see it there. Oh, sorry. Let me backtrack a little bit. Okay, they're right there. You'll be able to see it a little bit there. Bulletproof glass at Popeyes. Why? To keep people from coming in and shooting them or harming them while they're working. Are we really at a place in our country where our restaurants need bulletproof glass? I mean, it used to be, remember, banks, anyone who handled large sums of money, sometimes a customer service desk at a grocery store, or again a bank. That's where you're used to seeing, those cash places that check cash checks and stuff. They always have bulletproof glass because they're handling large sums of money. Here we have Popeyes, where most people use a debit card or credit card these days. And they have full bulletproof glass. It's not to keep people from injuring and killing them. And then we see this happening in all these different stores lately. When I was in California, I went to a Walmart, and I kid you not, there was a bulletproof glass over the makeup department. It's like, what in the world is happening in our country? And how did we let it get this far to where we're so worried about people coming in and harming us, physically harming us, that we have to pull up bulletproof glass at a fast food restaurant? We've got a real problem in this country, a real problem. And I am waiting for these problems to be solved, because we have got to do something to stop the criminal element. We have to. We cannot allow this to continue. Glenn says they are arresting people for spitting on or throwing Subway sandwiches. You're right, Glenn. Remember that in Washington, D.C., that guy, he was screaming at officers. We played the video at the time. And then he took his Subway sandwich and threw it at one of the officers. And boy, they went over there and they got him. And I don't know, I didn't follow up to see what the outcome was. I know he lost his job. I believe he worked, Glenn, you might remember, he worked at, I don't think it was the Pentagon. It could have been. He worked with the government in some way. But either way, he lost his job, as he should. And Glenn says you would never see that at KFC, man. I don't know. Bulletproof going up everywhere as expected, Just unfortunate. The last thing I want to touch base on is, before we head out, and again, we're going to talk about a lot more of this stuff as the week goes on. Donald Trump made a very interesting statement. Now, I'm not going to go down this path of fear. I don't expect us to enter into any type of nuclear war. But I won't be surprised if we don't go to war. And the reason why is because there's something going on. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but there is something going on. We have Donald Trump, who made a statement just the other day about relocating 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned closer to Russia. And why? Donald Trump said in his own words, I do not have the video for it, but I watched it and heard it. He said in his own words, well, because we were threatened by the former president of Russia, which would be Dmitry Medvedev. Now, Dmitry Medvedev, and I've read his statements, what he said, I didn't mention nuclear war in any capacity, is that he talked about how Trump keeps doing a 180. At one point, he'll favor Russia, then he turns and he favors Ukraine. We have Ukraine asking for Tomahawk missiles right now. Hopefully, Donald Trump will not ever cave in and give Zelensky some Tomahawk missiles. That would be a very big mistake, and in more ways than one, because A, he would lose a lot of support here for the folks that voted for him, and B, we just can't go down that road. And so Medvedev did make a statement talking about how Trump is kind of flip-flopping back and forth, and that if we continue down this path of supporting Ukraine, if we continue to give them weapons, we've all heard this story back and forth for the past couple of years, so that's nothing new. He said Russia will go to war against NATO. So Donald Trump heard that statement and he thought, all right, you know how Donald Trump is. Well, Russia, we're going to one up you. We're going to reposition our nuclear submarines a little closer to your borders, kind of as a deterrent, as a warning. But it's this same back and forth, back and forth. That part's not different. We have repositioned our nuclear submarines several times in the past. Russia has threatened us with war many times in the past. We have threatened Russia with war many times in the past. To that. Difference now is a couple of different things. One, Palestine, whether you call it Palestine or not, Palestine did apply to join BRICS. Now, whether BRICS will accept them is another story. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, just to get back at this whole situation with NATO and Ukraine. So that's one thing we've really got to keep an eye on, and also a very big deal, because if that happens, if they are allowed to join BRICS as their own sovereign nation, then they will have the support and the most ties between Hamas and Iran. I wouldn't be terribly surprised, but I don't expect BRICS to, but you never know. Now, what a bigger situation is that's taking place is we have all these meetings going on. We all know, and I wasn't here to talk about it, in those days I had off, about Pete I almost called him Peach. Pete Hegseth calling that meeting for all of our top military folks to come in, meet, and let's talk. Well, no one wants to say, well, what are they talking about? What's going on? Now, we know Donald Trump is also going to be meeting with all of our top military officials. Something is going on, and it's not a situation of we need to increase our recruitment numbers. It's nothing along those lines. I absolutely do believe they are going to be talking about war. And the reason why I believe this is because this situation has reached its breaking point. We've gone back and forth with the situation with Ukraine. Russia is not caving in. Zelensky, and of course the with the backing of NATO, is not caving in. The situation cannot continue. The back and forth, back and forth. Millions of people at this point, have been injured, have been killed between that war, what's going on in Gaza. It's just unbelievable. These are two situations that we know Donald Trump wants to end. He wants to end both of these. He ran his campaign on promoting peace, not only in the Gaza region between Israel and the Palestinian people, but also between Ukraine and Russia. So he is going to do everything he can to create that peace. But at the same time, again, Russia's not giving, Zelensky's not giving, Israel's not giving, Hamas is not giving in. And we've reached a boiling point in both of these situations. And we have no choice but to act. And how we will act, I don't know. And I think it was you, Jay, earlier that said something about Putin was a loose cannon. Well, Donald Trump's a loose cannon too. And that's what I like about him. I love about him that he's a loose cannon because that keeps people on their toes. Reading Dmitry Medvedev's statement talking about Donald Trump and how, well, right now he says he gave a speech that he's siding with Ukraine. And if that happens, we're going to go to war against NATO. And then he also flip flops and he says, well, Trump does usually change his position every so many days. So we have faith that he'll come back and once again fight for Russia, in this situation. So, but we're kind of at this pivotal point right now. Something has to give. We cannot allow these situations to continue because we have European countries completely bankrupting themselves to support Ukraine, which is insane. Look at the hole we've dug our own selves getting involved in Ukraine. Donald Trump said $350 billion is what we spent on Ukraine under the Biden administration. And then now, of course, Donald Trump has turned that situation around. We're still supplying weapons to Ukraine. The difference is we're not paying for them. Europe is paying for them. But at the same time, why are we involved at all? Why are we giving weapons to Ukraine? Even if they're buying them, do we really need money that bad? Do we really? And of course, this situation makes Putin very unhappy. And now again, we have Zelensky asking for Tomahawk missiles, and I don't expect that to ever be approved. Glenn says, what are you thinking about Candace Owens' theory? Tyler Robinson was set up. He's not the shooter. We'll talk. We can talk more about that. Between Russia and Donald Trump and the throwing around of the word nuclear. Once again, I don't expect a nuclear war by any means, but we're going to keep an eye on this because I'm telling you, something is going on. I don't know what it is. I can only guess at this point, but something big is happening, something really big. Either we are preparing to go to war against Russia, we as the United States or NATO. Something is going on. So we'll do our best to keep up with it, and hopefully it's just a false alarm. And then Glenn, to your comment, we talked. I don't know if you probably missed that part of the show earlier. We talked about that a little bit already when we had Col Joe Adams on the show, and I like Candace Owens. I don't think I agree with her theory. But as far as well, you know what? Let me backtrack, Glenn. I don't know about her theory that Tyler Robinson was set up and he's not the shooter. I know that she thinks that Israel is behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I don't personally think Israel is behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I really don't. I've never thought from flip flop. I think the easiest answer, like I said, we had talking to Colonel Adams, is the simplest answer, and that is that Tyler Robinson acted mostly alone, not completely alone, mostly alone. He's a crazy lunatic, part of the trans power movement, and he was radicalized in college. He hates Christians, he hates conservatives, he hated Charlie Kirk. He believed all of the lies you hear in liberal media. And so therefore, he thought he was doing his country a favor by taking out a white supremacist. I really do think that's what Tyler Robinson was thinking. Now, here's where 10% of me isn't sure about, largely. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. I do think Tyler Robinson fired a shot. I absolutely do think he was on the roof. He fired a shot. And where that shot went, is that the shot that hit Charlie Kirk or not? I don't know. And if you look at a lot of videos that look like a shot, being fired and a shot going past Charlie Kirk. One went into the backdrop behind him. Some people said that was actually his necklace flying off or something else. It looked like a shot to me to some degree. And then there was one coming off from the side. But I would think that there are more people on the ground who would say, "Oh, well, we found a bullet here, around here, and we're not hearing in the awning, above him or around him that would show any other type of trajectory." So it's a tough situation. Glenn says I don't agree with her, and largely, Glenn, I don't either. But like I said with Colonel Joe Adams earlier today, there are still some little loose ends that don't make sense to me. They just do not make sense. Taking the rifle apart makes no sense. With a screwdriver, that makes no sense. I do absolutely believe that there are more people who know about what happened. I would say 90%. I believe Tyler Robinson is enacted alone in firing the one and only shot. I do truly believe that. I do believe. There are some little loose ends, though, that kind of make me think, well, maybe there's something more to it. It's certainly possible. He is your typical patsy. As soon as I saw him, I'm like, yep, your typical patsy. He is somebody who could, I think, be easily set up. And, and his partner, his trans partner, Lance Twiggs, is somebody who had a lot of connections. He belonged to some of these trans power groups. Some very powerful people, in fact, were connected and following him on social media. And I certainly do believe more people knew about what was happening. I hope that the FBI does continue to investigate and they do reveal who all of these people were. And I'm not talking about just people in these Reddit or Discord groups that Tyler Robinson was talking in about what he was going to do. I'm talking about people who had knowledge of what was going to take place, knowledge. And so, therefore, I think that there are more people involved. I hope we see some prosecutions of those people. But I've looked at every angle, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around somebody else being the shooter, just because there every time I try to give an example, there's that loose end that holds it back, where we hear the shot, we see the shot. I know a lot of people say, well, his shirt moved up, he had that mic on that moved. And I don't have an explanation for that. And I think that's where the 10% of me is a little bit confused. There's things that I see that took place that I don't have an explanation for. But I also don't see any solid evidence that anyone intentionally hired somebody to take Charlie Kirk out. I really don't. But it could certainly happen. Glenn says Candace is losing credibility. I wouldn't go that far, Glenn, for me personally. I like Candace Owens. I don't personally feel like she's losing credibility because we also have to remember that Tucker Carlson backs up a lot of what Candace Owens is saying. And I certainly think that Tucker Carlson is very careful and cautious with his words. And I think that Candace is speaking from the heart. I think she was friends with Charlie Kirk, and these are things she sees and has observed and studied, and she is behind her convictions because that's what she thinks actually happened. Now, whether it happened or not is a whole different story. I think maybe she might be too close to the case, and so she's thinking that some random person wouldn't have just done this. But the only thing that I have to say about it really is that we know there are going to be false flag events. We know that our government, our own government, even under Donald Trump, he doesn't have full control of the CIA, even our government, foreign governments. We all know that they absolutely have the ability to hire an assassin, somebody who's never going to be seen, who's not going to be on any video, who we're never going to hear a word about. We know. Look at what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. Again, we're not going to go down that trail right now. But what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, there's absolutely 100% more to the story. 100% that is a cover up. I am absolutely positive of it. We can talk about it another day on the show. I am absolutely positive of it. I have proof of it, quite honestly. And it's absolutely a cover up. And that was absolutely a planned assassination of Donald Trump. No question about it. The thing with Charlie Kirk, the only thing that would stand out to me is that, like Colonel Joe Adams was saying, Colonel, I had not heard this. Colonel Adams heard that he was a possible fit for our 2028 vice president. Now, I've not heard any talk of that, but I'm not saying that's not true, of course. But what I have heard, and many people, including Donald Trump, said it himself, is that Charlie Kirk would make a great president someday down the road. And he was certainly lining himself up to be in that position. And he was so much more than a political commentator, so much more than a Christian, so much more than somebody who went around to these different college campuses and tried to. What's so funny about that, people call him a white supremacist, a racist, a homophobe, all these other things. But actually, he went out to have open conversation about these topics, open conversation. It is the left media that has taken his words and twisted them to make it seem like he's a white supremacist or a racist or a homophobe, when in fact he was none of those things. We've all said that the only way to solve some of these situations is open dialogue, and that's what Charlie Kirk did. He created open dialogue. Now that's a great thing about him, but the number one thing about him is that he is the owner of a political action committee. A lot of people gave him a lot of money, millions upon millions of dollars. To him a lot of money. Corporations paid him a lot of money. Potentially foreign nations either did or tried to pay him a lot of money, which we know he refused the money from Israel. I think that was $150 million. So that sets up a situation like Charlie Kirk as so much more. The speaker, we could easily say somebody like crazy leftist went out and took him out. But Charlie Kirk, the political action committee owner, somebody who took millions of dollars in, somebody who absolutely, absolutely turned over the vote towards conservatives in a lot of very heated districts, including getting Donald Trump elected, because I can promise you, Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, if it weren't for them, Donald Trump would have not gotten the early vote. Same for Elon Musk. So when you look at it from that perspective, you can say, okay, I get why maybe a foreign entity or a corporation or a big player might want to take him out and spend a lot of money to do so. So going on there. Curtis says, I feel the whole thing is a ruse. I have even seen a theory that it was staged using a hologram technology. I can't even dismiss that. So many weird connections that make me question the narrative. I can only trust in God at this point. The Bible talks about the mass deception that will happen in the end times, and even the elect would be deceived if Jesus didn't return. And Curtis, I mean, that's all you can do is put your trust and faith in God. That's for sure. Because God is the only person at this point who really knows what took place that day. Glenn says they called Rush all those names too. Most certainly. And Glenn says Kirk distanced himself from her being Candace. That's why she wasn't invited to speak at his memorial. And that's certainly possible. You know, I don't know about that. I know about Candace. I've never watched Candace Owens, quite honestly. I've never seen her show. I know very little about her. The only thing I do know about her was her talking about Brigitte Macron and how Brigitte Macron was truly transgender. And yeah, Candace seems like she kind of goes off the deep end on sex. You know, I understand, but you know, Brigitte Macron, what, 22 lawsuits against Candace Owens and then dropped them. And then allegedly Brigitte Macron went into a court in the UK, provided them intimate photos of herself to prove that she was actually born a woman. And I haven't heard anything more about the story since then, nor have I followed up or looked at it. You know, and so I don't really have an opinion on Candace Owens. I know absolutely nothing about her. I've never watched even one show. I've never watched any podcast, and I've never watched her podcast. Now, Tucker Carlson on the other story, you know, he hasn't been saying there's something more going on here. You know, then he kind of shut up about it, and I haven't heard anything since. Now, of course, Kirk's family has absolutely denied all of these things, all of it. They've denied all of it. And you know, before we go, this is the last thing I'm going to say on that for today, because we are way, way over our time. Is that, you know, as you guys know, it's been confirmed that there was no autopsy. Now, a lot of people see that as a sign that it wasn't really Charlie Kirk, or he really didn't die. He's just worried about being assassinated, so he's in hiding. You know, maybe he's in witness protection. Some people have said there's a lot of different theories going around right now, a lot of different theories. And I don't personally see it as being that unusual that he didn't have an autopsy. Quite honestly, there's a lot of people, particularly Christians, who do not want or, to have an autopsy. And families definitely don't want their family members to have an autopsy. A lot of people had read statements talking about the bullet stopping, one of his bones stopping the bullet, and they assumed that came from the medical examiner, but that actually came from a surgeon. Now, for me personally, I have no idea why they even took Charlie Kirk into surgery, quite honestly, based on that wound. That I'll never understand, because there is no way he survived, even 5 minutes, after that type of wound. That's not physically possible, but they did take him into surgery. And the surgeon said he's the one who witnessed the round. It was recovered out of his neck. They said it had hit a bone. That's what stopped it from going further. And that had it gone further, it probably would have harmed someone else. And he also said that the round was recovered right below the skin. Now, that was not a medical examiner during an autopsy. That was a doctor who released those statements. The doctor signed off on the death certificate, and autopsy was never completed. I personally don't read too much into that. I know that's a big thing going around right now on social media. And Glenn says he's hiding out with Elvis, right? Yeah, there will be rumors, trust me, Glenn, for the rest of our lives where people will say Charlie Kirk is still alive. I'm already seeing photos online of Charlie Kirk. And then, of course, we've already covered this on the show. They had the video of his wife at the casket. And she's, holding his hand. People say, those are fake rubber hands. No, those are real hands. If you look at Charlie Kirk, that's exactly what his hands look like. The color was a little off because they put the waxy makeup on your body, for an open casket. And so that's why the coloring looked a little off, because it's impossible to match it up, completely, especially after so much blood loss. We only have 5 or 6 pints of blood in our bodies. And when you take a hit like that, and that type of injury where it allegedly severed 2 major arteries, you're going to bleed out very quickly, not to be graphic, very, very quickly, very quickly. And even as Charlie's best friend and mentor said, he sat with him in the vehicle on the way to the hospital, and he was not there. His eyes were open, they were fixed. He was not there. It hit him so fast. We can only hope and pray that he felt nothing and knew nothing. But we'll pick up on these things as new information is released. But either way, I've got to go because I am way over my time, almost an hour over. It was great having Colonel Joe Adams with us. I hate having missed so many shows over the past 2 weeks, but I'll be here this week. I will not be here Wednesday. My work is so busy right now, which is a good thing since I'm self-employed, that I've got people working. I've got to work today, tonight, tomorrow, all day Wednesday from 7 a.m. till about 10 p.m. We've got a big premiere here in the St. Louis area taking place. Wednesday, I'll be really tired on Friday morning. I work really late Wednesday night, but you know what? I will be here, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, if things play out correctly. But I do hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for joining me. Always great to see all your comments and to have all of these familiar faces and cover, of course, all of these topics together. But I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Again, today, better get out and enjoy it. And I will see you all tomorrow.